100 Forgotten Things from 1960s America. Imagine stepping into a world where the rhythm of life was slower, but somehow richer. The 1960s in America wasn't just about rock and roll and vintage cars. It was filled with the kind of everyday moments that today feel like stories from another planet. Moments we didn't realize were special until they were gone. People didn't need two incomes to survive. The average annual salary was around $7,000, and it was enough. One job paid the bills, fed the family, filled the gas tank, and still left room for saving. There was a kind of calm to life. You didn't have everything, but you never felt behind. The idea of just enough wasn't sad, it was satisfying. Homes had character. White picket fences, wide porches, and neighbors you actually talked to. You didn't just wave politely, you stopped and chatted. You shared coffee, stories, and leftovers. Kids played outside without tracking apps. No one worried when the door was unlocked. Safety wasn't in security systems. It was in the community itself. And there was the milkman every morning, like clockwork. The sound of glass bottles touching down on the porch became part of your morning soundtrack. Sometimes there'd be a little bottle of chocolate milk just for the kids. No app needed. Just trust, routine, and a small joy that started the day. Laundry flapped in the wind like flags of normal life. Clotheslines ran across backyards, holding socks, sheets, and secrets. You'd pull towels off the line and press them to your face, not for softness, but for that fresh, sun-dried scent. It smelled like home. At the gas station, you didn't have to leave your car. A uniformed attendant greeted you with a smile, filled your tank, cleaned your windshield, and checked your oil off for a few coins and a thank you. Sometimes you even got a free paper map. Real service, no machines, no touchscreen confusion. Green stamps were the currency of delayed gratification. Collected one by one, they lived in carefully organized booklets. The goal wasn't cash. It was a blender, a new toaster, a shiny kitchen scale. You flipped through the redemption catalog like it was a book of dreams, waiting for the day you'd trade in those stamps for something real. But the 60s weren't just soft and sweet. There was a cold fear in the air, too. The Cuban Missile Crisis may have peaked in 1962, but the anxiety lasted longer. Families kept radios close. Kids practiced duck-and-cover drills, hiding under desks, pretending the wooden surface could shield them from a nuclear blast. That fear didn't scream. It whispered constantly in the back of everyone's mind. Even shoes told a story. Saddle shoes weren't just footwear. They were a rite of passage. You wore them until the soles gave out. You scuffed them up during recess, then polished them white again before dinner. They squeaked when you walked through the school halls. They were annoying, yes, but they were yours. Everyone had them, whether you liked them or not. And then there was photography, the art of patience. You didn't snap 10 selfies in a row. You lined up one perfect shot, checked the lighting, and then click. The flash bulb popped, sizzled, and got hot instantly. One use, one photo. And if it didn't turn out, well, you try again with another bulb. At family events, the burst of 5 flashes in a row wasn't unusual. Everyone left seeing stars, but the photo album had to be perfect. There was a kind of magic in childhood that didn't require screens or batteries. Just a red plastic Viewmaster held up to your face could take you to Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, or deep inside a Disney fairy tale. You clicked through each reel slowly, savoring the 3D images that felt almost alive. Sometimes you'd rewind the reel just to relive your favorite scenes. It wasn't about speed. It was about wonder. Every neighborhood had that little barber shop with a red and white spinning bowl outside. You'd walk into the sound of a radio playing soft old tunes, a scent of shaving cream in the air, and men chatting about baseball, politics, or what happened down the street. No apps, no online bookings. You waited your turn, listened to town gossip, and left feeling fresher and a little more connected to your world. Home movies weren't stored on cloud drives. They flickered to life on 8mm film. Families would gather in the living room, pull down the projector screen, thread the film with care, then switch off the lights. The room lit up with grainy footage of birthday parties, wobbly toddlers, and sun-drenched vacations. Even though the images shook and the color was never quite right, they carried something you couldn't digitize: laughter, memory, belonging. Cars weren't just transportation, they were personality. The 1950s and early 60s rolled out some of the most unforgettable designs. Long, bold, colorful, often with tail fins that made them look ready to fly. You saw them everywhere, each one telling a story. A Chevy Bel Air said freedom. A Ford Thunderbird whispered cool. A Cadillac Eldorado screamed success. Making ice wasn't as easy as pushing a button. You wrestled with cold metal trays, lifting the lever like you were cracking a safe, hoping the ice wouldn't explode across the kitchen. But when the cubes popped free with a metallic snap, it felt satisfying in a way modern fridges can't replicate. Even the ice felt colder, sharper, more real. Before car seats and seatbelt laws, the back seat of a station wagon was a wonderland. Piled with blankets, toys, and snacks, it was a moving playroom. Kids bounced around, leaned out windows, argued over who got the best spot, and somehow miraculously survived. Every pothole became part of the game. The road didn't just take you somewhere. It was the adventure. Elevators were once operated by actual people, men and women, in pressed uniforms and sometimes white gloves. They'd open the iron gate, turn the crank with smooth control, and announce each floor with the authority of a train conductor. Fourth floor housewares, linens, toys. Riding one felt like entering a place that mattered. Polaroid cameras were pure magic. You pushed the button, and the machine spat out a blank square. Then came the wait, the shaking, the watching. Slowly, almost shyly, the image appeared: your face, your moment, right there in your hand. It felt like proof that something had truly happened. Vending machines didn't ask for a swipe or fingerprint. You fed them coins, pushed a sticky mechanical button, and hoped the candy bar wouldn't get stuck on the top row. If it did, you'd shake the whole machine like a mad scientist until gravity gave in. Sometimes the reward was cold soda, other times stale gum. But always, it felt like a win. And then there was the music of summer, the ice cream truck melody. You'd hear it from blocks away, and your heart would leap. You'd dash barefoot across burning pavement, chasing that tinny tune like it was a siren call. It didn't matter if it was the same popsicle every time. It still tasted like magic. Lunch boxes weren't disposable. They were solid, loud, and always personal. Metal boxes covered in images from TV shows or comic books let you show off who you were. Inside, a little thermos rattled with milk, soup, or whatever your mom packed. The smell never quite left. Neither did the pride of carrying that box to school like it was your badge of honor. The cartoons were simpler. Stranger 2, puppets with frozen grins, hosts with stiff delivery, sets that looked like someone's garage. But kids didn't care. When Captain Kangaroo or Howdy Doody came on, it felt like they were talking directly to you. That's all that mattered. Walking to school wasn't a mission. It was an open-ended journey. No GPS. No parents watching from the car. You were trusted to get there. Of course, detours happened. You might stop for candy, explore a back alley, or hang out under a tree for too long. But somehow, you always made it home in time for dinner. No one tracked your steps, but the freedom shaped who you were. Then came the moment the record dropped. A soft click, a faint hiss, and the music would fill the room like warm light. It didn't stream, it stayed. And you didn't skip it, you listened, beginning to end, letting each note stitch itself into your memory. Every Saturday party, every school dance, every heartbreak had its own soundtrack, and it played from shiny black vinyl records. You could tell which 45s were worn out, and if the needle kept skipping, you knew the trick. Place a coin gently on top to steady it. Back then, music wasn't background noise. You sat with it, listened to the words, felt the weight of every note. Tucked neatly inside every Mothersy purse was a folded plastic rain bonnet ready for action the moment clouds rolled in. It wasn't stylish, but it was effective. When that first drop hit, the bonnet snapped open like a superhero cape, protecting hair that had taken hours to set. You never questioned why every mom had one. It just was. Like chewing gum in the side pocket or tissues wrapped in a rubber band, it was a sign of love disguised as preparation. Watching TV wasn't passive, it was a group effort. One person held the rabbit ears just right. Someone else twisted aluminum foil into hopeful antenna hacks, and everyone shouted directions across the room. Stop there, you'll go back. When the image finally cleared, the entire room celebrated like they'd fixed a satellite. It didn't always last long, but for those minutes, it felt like magic. Street lights weren't just for visibility. They were the unspoken curfew for every child in the neighborhood. 1 second you were mid-game, mid-laugh, mid-run, and then the lights came on. Instantly, kids vanished like ghosts. Bikes screeched to a halt. Moms leaned out of screen doors and called one word: home. We didn't argue. We just knew. For a single penny, you could unlock a universe of flavor. Candy wasn't a treat, it was a ritual. You'd walk into the corner store with sweaty coins clutched tight and leave with a crinkly brown paper bag full of tiny treasures. Wax bottles with syrupy juice, candy buttons on paper, jawbreakers that outlasted recess. Nobody cared about sugar content or die numbers. It was pure freedom in candy form. Before the internet, before even CDs, knowledge came in boxes shipped by mail, one book at a time. Encyclopedias were ordered with pride, each volume taking weeks to arrive. Door-to-door salesmen promised your child would become a genius. And when the books finally came, they took center stage on the living room shelf. You may have only opened tea to look up dinosaurs, but still, they made you feel smarter just sitting there. Glass-bottled soda had its own ceremony. You couldn't just twist a cap. You needed the bottle opener mounted on the garage wall. It clicked, popped, and rewarded you with a fizzy rush that tasted better than anything from today's plastic. Afterward, the caps lined up on shelves like trophies from little victories. Cold, sweet, and earned. Banks back then didn't just offer savings, they bribed you. Open an account, and you might walk out with a shiny new toaster, a blender, or a set of glassware. It wasn't weird. It was normal. And honestly, sometimes the toaster was more reliable than the bank's interest rate. Evenings were for gathering around the glowing TV, watching Bonanza or Andy Griffith, with canned laughter and commentary from the couch. Someone always pointed at the screen, predicting who'd get shot next, or laughed when the sheriff said something corny. TV wasn't personal. It was shared. A family experience that brought you together, not pulled you apart. School meant mimeograph paper-warm, purple-inked, and strangely irresistible. Teachers passed out freshly printed sheets, and half the class lifted them to their noses, like it was some sacred ritual. No one knew why they smelled so good. We just knew they did. Lunch came in paper bags, squished by books and backpacks. Sandwiches with bologna and mustard, a single apple, a packet of chips, and if you were lucky, a cookie. You didn't just eat. You traded. Chips for candy, cookie for extra crackers. It wasn't lunch. It was negotiation. Then came family slideshow nights, signaled by the sound of the projector warming up and the room going dark. The first click of the circular tray was unmistakable. Blurry vacations, badly lit birthday photos, and endless commentary from Uncle Joe. Someone always snored halfway through, and nobody ever admitted to it. Typing class was chaos in symphony. Loud clicks, stuck keys, smeared ink, and the constant slap of the carriage return. One typo, and you had to start over. No backspace. No autocorrect. Just correction fluid and frustration. But you learned something deeper: patience, precision, and the art of not giving up. In the trunk of every family car, there was always that scratchy wool blanket. It was rarely used, but always there. For emergency picnics, surprise snowstorms, or just in case. It itched like crazy, but it felt dependable. A quiet kind of comfort that didn't say much, but never failed you. Sunday mornings meant itchy church clothes. The shoes were too tight, the collars too high, and the pews too hard. You counted the ceiling tiles, whispered jokes, tried not to laugh, and waited for peppermint from Grandma. The sermons were long, but the memories stuck. Popcorn was earned. You'd pour the kernels into a pot, add oil, and shake hard. The smell filled the whole house before the first pop even happened. When the lid lifted with overflowing golden crunch, it felt like winning. TV dinners arrived in shiny foil trays and made the kitchen smell like hot metal and mashed peas. They were never cooked evenly, but that didn't matter. The brownie always burned on the edges and stayed cold in the middle, but somehow it felt futuristic. And Christmas? That meant metallic tinsel-thin silver strands you didn't toss, but carefully hung one by one. The lights shimmered behind them, turning every tree into a glowing masterpiece. The tinsel stuck to everything, but no one minded. That shine was worth it. Radio buttons clicked, like tiny vaults unlocking music. One push and the rest popped out with a satisfying snap. You didn't scroll, you pressed. And when the static faded and the music kicked in, it felt like you'd tuned into something real. Behind the old TV, soft orange lights glowed quietly from vacuum tubes, gently humming like the set was breathing. When the screen flickered, you didn't panic, you tapped the side. And if it went out completely, someone would grab the culprit tube, wrap it in a paper bag, and take it down to the hardware store for a replacement. No calling a technician. You fixed it because that's what you did. It wasn't DIY, it was just life. Women wrapped their hair in rollers before bed, like tiny time bombs of beauty and hope. Foam, plastic, some held with pins each, promising bouncy curls by morning. They slept on them like warriors, careful not to flatten a single wave. And in the morning, unrolling each section felt like opening a gift. You just hoped the style lasted through lunch. Milk at school came in tiny, stubborn cartons. You'd try to open them neatly, but they always tore weird or splashed everywhere. They arrived stacked in loud metal crates that smelled faintly of metal. By the time snack break came around, the milk wasn't really cold anymore, but it was what you had, and it was fine. Grandma's sewing machine didn't need a plug, it needed feet. She pressed that iron pedal with the rhythm of a drummer, while her hands moved the fabric like magic. The machine clicked and whirred, creating perfectly straight lines without a digital screen or warning beep. It always smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish. And somehow, everything she made with it just felt warmer. In diners, you'd spot a cigarette vending machine glowing quietly in the corner. Rows of little windows showed different brands. You'd drop in coins, pull the lever, and hear the thunk of the pack hitting the tray. Nobody checked your ID. Coke bottles were heavy, pulled cold from the freezer, and the moment that glass touched your lips, it tasted like something you'd remember forever. It wasn't a better time, just a different one. Tang wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol of the future. NASA said astronauts drank it, and that was enough. Kids didn't care if it was powdery or too strong when Mom mixed it wrong. It tasted like space, adventure, and a world where anything felt possible. Rotary phones made you earn every call. If someone's number had too many nines, you sighed before even starting. One slip, and you had to start from zero. But that spinning wheel, That clicking return, somehow, it was more satisfying than any touchscreen today. It was clunky. It was slow. It was perfect. Car seats weren't ergonomic. They were just big, soft benches. You slid across them during every turn, landed in a sibling's lap at every stoplight, and braced yourself as Mom's arm flew across your chest to hold you back. It wasn't safe, but it was real. Loud, messy, full of chaos and laughter. Sofas wore plastic covers like armor. In the summer, they turned every nap into a sweaty nightmare. Your legs stuck, your shirt clung, and the sound it made when you shifted embarrassing. But you couldn't remove them, especially not when guests were around. Sometimes not even after. The yellow pages were a household tool, and also a weapon if you dropped them on your foot. As thick as a cinder block, it held the answer to everything. Plumbers, dog groomers, late-night pizza. It also served as a booster seat and a doorstop. You didn't Google, you flipped. Film didn't come on memory cards. It came in black plastic canisters you had to load carefully into the camera. Pull, align, win tight. And every photo you took felt precious. No instant preview, no deleting. Just hope and a trip to the Photoshop weeks later to see how they turned out. Canned spaghetti wasn't fine dining, but it did the job. It came out orange, slightly mushy, and labeled Italian style with full confidence. You poured it into a scratched bowl, added nothing, and still somehow it hit the spot. Drive-in theaters were pure magic. You parked your car, hung a clunky speaker on the window, and watched stories unfold under a sky full of stars. Kids in pajamas in the back seat, teenagers in convertibles. Popcorn spilled, no one cared. Your car was your couch, and the whole experience felt like a private escape. Diapers weren't disposable. They came in folded white cloths with big metal pins. The boxes told you, boil, bleach, repeat. A big plastic bucket in the bathroom was just part of the routine. The smell of soap and detergent filled the house on laundry day. It wasn't easy, but it was done with love. Toy trucks back then were serious, made of metal, edges sharp, always missing a wheel. You could dig holes with them, roll them downstairs, or accidentally put a dent in the wall if your little brother got mad. They weren't safe, but they lasted. Job listings came in two types: help wanted male and help wanted female. Secretaries here, mechanics there. That's just how it was. The roles were drawn in thick lines, and if you wanted to step outside the box, it took guts. Soda bottles weren't just drinks, they were currency. You finished the last sip, and instead of tossing it away, you lined the bottles up in a cardboard box. They clinked as you carried them back to the store, and in return, you got nickels. Not a fortune, but enough to buy candy. That shimmer on a bottle wasn't just glass, it was opportunity. A quiet little hustle every kid understood. Before every movie at the theater, there came a cartoon. A few minutes of fun before the lights dimmed and the real story began. Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, Popeye, they set the mood, got everyone laughing, made the popcorn taste better. The cinema wasn't just about the film. It was a full evening. Soda, cartoons, and 2 hours of magic under a flickering screen. A new plastic lunchbox had its own smell. Sharp, sweet, slightly strange. The moment you opened the lid, it hit you. Inside, a wax paper wrapped sandwich, usually bologna, and maybe, just maybe, a Twinkie. That scent became part of the school day, tied to lunchtime stories, sticky fingers, and the quiet pride of a new box that said something about who you were. Step into a real 1960s home, and the time travel begins. Colors burst from every surface. Patterns clashed with confidence. Wallpaper looked like art, and furniture didn't apologize for being bold. Electronics were heavy. Furniture had personality, and nothing felt like it came from a flat pack. One of the first things you might see? The conversation bit. A sunken space in the middle of the living room, lined with soft cushions and warmth. It wasn't a couch, it was a gathering zone. You didn't just sit, you nestled. Talk flowed naturally. Families gathered close, not spaced apart. Winter nights by the fireplace, laughter echoing in that cozy dip in the floor. These were moments stitched into memory. In the kitchen, Crone ruled. Everything sparkled: the toaster, the coffee percolator, the mixer, even the flour canisters. It wasn't just about function, it was about shine. Crone wasn't cold, it was a sign of cleanliness, modernity, progress. The glint of morning light on the Crone coffee maker meant the day had officially begun. Mounted on the kitchen wall was a rotary phone. It clacked with every dial, loud and proud. It came in colors: pastel pink, mint green, butter yellow, matching countertops and tiled walls. As Mom stirred soup or kneaded dough, she talked with the phone tucked between her shoulder and cheek, the cord swinging like a lifeline. The Western Electric 500 wasn't just a phone. It was a fixture, and it worked like a charm every single time. Bathrooms were bold. Pink, mint, seafoam, lemon. These weren't accent colors. They were the bathroom. Sinks, tubs, toilets, all perfectly matched. Inspired by First Lady Mamie Eisenhower and her love of pink, the movement swept across America. These spaces felt fresh, full of personality, and almost cinematic in their confidence. Somewhere between glamour and comfort, they made bathrooms feel alive. Back in the living room, the stereo wasn't just a device, it was furniture. Built right into a wood cabinet, it stood proudly, a place for music and memories. You opened the lid, placed a vinyl record on the turntable, and let the warmth of analog sound fill the space. It wasn't just playing a song, it was an experience, a ritual, a moment that mattered. And everywhere you looked, wood paneling. Rich, dark tones covering the walls, adding warmth and a kind of quiet sophistication to the home. It made rooms feel cozy, grounded. Today, it might seem dated to some, but back then, it was the heartbeat of a well-loved house. Mid-century wood paneling wasn't just decoration. It was warmth you could feel. Real walnut, oak, mahogany. The grain was natural, the finish smooth. You could run your fingers across the surface and feel the craftsmanship. Whether it stretched across an entire wall or framed a cozy bedroom corner, it gave the home a sense of intimacy. It made you want to stay in, light a fire, and let the world outside wait. In bedrooms, it brought calm. Soft shadows played across the panels as the sun dipped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy, but it gave the room a kind of soul. Over time, drywall replaced wood. Clean, efficient, but something got lost. And now, slowly, wood paneling is making a comeback. Not out of nostalgia, but because it feels right. It brings back the richness of real materials and honest design. Look around, and you might notice something odd and beautiful: plants growing right out of the architecture. Built-in planters were everywhere in the 60s, tucked into room dividers, stretching along kitchen counters, rising up from tiled corners. Snake plants, ferns, pothos, these weren't afterthoughts. Nature was part of the structure. They made the home feel alive. A little jungle tucked inside suburbia. A gentle reminder that life doesn't have to be so sterile. Today, as we talk more about biophilic design, maybe these clever green features deserve a real revival. A modern apartment with a hidden planter? It's more than decor, it's breathing space. And then there were fondue nights. A flickering little burner at the center of the table, a bubbling pot of melted cheese or chocolate, and a circle of friends or family armed with long colored forks. You dipped bread, strawberries, maybe even meat, and somehow that simple act turned dinner into an event. Fondue sets were essential. Ceramic or metal pots, tiny fuel burners, multicolored forks. They weren't just trendy, they were intimate. Everyone leaned in. everyone shared. Laughter filled the room as forks tangled and chocolate dripped. A fondue night wasn't just about food. It was connection. Look up at the walls, and you'd be met with drama. Bold patterns, wild flowers, spirals, zigzags, starbursts. Wallpaper in the 1960s didn't whisper. It shouted. It turned every wall into a statement, every room into a personality. From the living room to the bathroom, those vibrant prints made the house feel like a living canvas. We moved away from it. We chose clean walls, safe whites. But something about those bold wallpapers keeps calling back. They were fearless. They told a story. And in today's age of cookie-cutter design, maybe that kind of bravery is exactly what we need again. Then there were the sunken bathtubs. Imagine walking into a softly lit bathroom and seeing a tub not perched above the floor, but gently set into it, surrounded by tile or even plants. It didn't just feel modern. It felt luxurious. You didn't step into a bath. You stepped into calm. These tubs were like little indoor spas, deep, quiet, and unbelievably relaxing. They faded away for a while too impractical, some said. But now, as we crave calm and escape in our homes, sunken tubs are starting to whisper again. Come back, soak deeper, stay longer. And for every ordinary meal, there was a kitchen that felt like a celebration. Retro diner kitchens were bright, bold, and unapologetically fun. Red and white checkered floors, chrome edges on tables and stools, candy-colored cabinets, maybe even a neon sign above the sink. It was the American diner, reimagined for your own home. You didn't just cook here. You hung out. You danced. You sneaked an extra soda from the pastel-colored fridge. Everything was designed to feel alive. Not polished perfection, but lived in joy. In the living room, walls weren't just blank surfaces. They told stories. Some were made of stone. Real stone. Slate, river rock, fieldstone. Each one unique. Each one with a color and texture no paint could replicate. They wrapped around fireplaces, stretched across entryways, stood strong like nature had stepped inside. Light would hit those stones at different angles through the day, casting shadows that moved like whispers. It made the house feel grounded, like it had grown from the earth itself. Today, when so many homes feel airless and temporary, a stone wall brings back a sense of permanence and peace. And finally, for those who loved a good drink or a good story or both, there were the built-in bars. Not oversized, not over-designed, just sleek little nooks tucked into a wall with mirrored backs and glowing shelves. They weren't flashy. They were functional, elegant, easy. Open the cabinet, and you'd find rows of glasses, perfectly lined bottles, and just enough space for the cocktail tools you needed. They turned any evening into an occasion. And they reminded you that your home wasn't just a place to live. It was a place to host, to laugh, to celebrate. As home entertaining became more than just a trend, those compact built-in bars started to sparkle again. They weren't just retro flair. They were clever, elegant, and quietly luxurious. With a mirrored back panel, smooth wood or laminate finishes, and perfectly placed lighting, these bars created a cozy destination for storytelling, slow-poured cocktails, and laughter that carried late into the night. Today, with updated finishes, hidden charging stations, and sleek built-in storage, they're ready for a comeback. Not just for parties, but for those everyday moments that feel like a celebration when shared right. Open a 1960s kitchen cabinet, and two things likely stared back at you: melamine dishes and Tupperware. Melamine was practical, colorful, and impossible to break. Perfect for kids, perfect for quick dinners. You'd find it in yellows, blues, oranges, with patterns that screamed family mealtime. And right next to them, stacked in neat towers, were those legendary Tupperware containers. Avocado green, burnt orange, beige. The lids were tight. The seal was satisfying. And somehow, no one ever had just one. Those containers weren't just about storage. They were about rhythm, how food was saved, shared, and kept fresh. They turned fridges into organized wonders and leftovers into a second chance at dinner. Step between the dining room and the living room, and you might pass through a quiet architectural gem, the lattice room divider, wooden or metal, straight lines or curving swirls. Not a wall, not just decoration, a soft separation. These dividers didn't shut out light, they played with it, casting patterns on the floor, whispering privacy without isolation. They were designed without shouting elegant solutions for homes that wanted connection and division at the same time. Today, in compact apartments or open-plan lofts, the idea still works, and it's still beautiful. Under your feet, a flash of fun, patterned linoleum, checkerboards, bright flowers, atomic bursts linoleum floors added personality in places you least expected. They were tough, easy to clean, and full of life. For families with muddy shoes and cereal spills, it was perfect. Over time, vinyl and tile took over. But now, with new eco-friendly materials and smarter production, linoleum is coming back stronger, greener, and just as bold. It's vintage made smart. In the laundry room, or sometimes hidden behind a hallway cabinet, you find another marvel of space-saving design, the fold-down ironing board. Open a little door, pull the board down, iron, fold it back, done. Tucked inside were your laundry tools, a bottle of starch, maybe a spray mister. No clutter, just calm. As we return to small, multifunctional spaces, this idea feels almost futuristic again. With modern materials, heat-proof coatings, and clever built-in power, they're not just retro, they're essential. And at the heart of many homes, the television, but not a thin rectangle on a wall. These were console TVs, big, proud, made of wood. They looked more like a sideboard than a screen. Inside, the world arrived. Black and white news, Technicolor dreams, family sitcoms, and space launches. The speakers were built in. The screen had a glass panel. You might even store board games or photo albums in the cabinet below. Families didn't just watch TV, they gathered around it. It was an anchor. And though today's screens are sleeker, that sense of importance is something modern tech hasn't quite recreated. And then there was the escape. Tiki. Inspired by Polynesian fantasies, tiki decor turned parts of suburban homes into tropical retreats. Bamboo furniture, carved wooden statues, glowing lanterns with grass fringe. These were pieces of paradise right in your basement. Some had full tiki bars with tiny umbrellas and coconut cups. Others just added a few touches. A glass shaped like a volcano, a palm leaf table runner, a ceramic mug with a mischievous grin. Tiki wasn't about accuracy, it was about fun. About transforming the ordinary into something playful and strange. It turned Friday night into an island getaway.